Hello and welcome to NDTV 24/7. I'm Priyanshi Sharma and our focus is on the Prime Minister's visit to the United States. Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Washington, D.C. as a part of his 4-day U.S. state visit. The Prime Minister has several important events lined up in Washington. On Thursday, he will attend a dinner hosted by the U.S. President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden. That will be followed by a bilateral meeting. After that, he will address a joint sitting of the U.S. Congress and he will be the first Indian leader to address the U.S. Congress twice. My colleague Maha Siddiqui is joining us for more on this, and she's joining us from the United States, tracking the Prime Minister's visit. And Maha, those important events lined up for the Prime Minister, what are the issues that could come up and how are the next 2 days important for both India and the United States?
Well, the next 2 days are certainly going to be very important because this is going to be Prime Minister Modi's first state visit to the U.S., even though he's come several times since he became the Prime Minister. But those were not state visits. They were working visits or just bilateral meetings between the two sides. This is an official state visit where he will be afforded a guard of honor, where there's a state dinner that will also take place on the 22nd evening, which will be hosted by the White House in their lawns. President Biden and the White House have invited about 250 other guests for that dinner as well. But all eyes are keenly trained on the takeaways because that really will be important, and that will also give us a sense of what the focus of the two countries really is, even though we understand that currently the common threat of China is what is driving the two sides to forge closer ties. But both sides insist that the relationship stands on its own merit as well. So we will have to see the takeaways, whether the takeaways really speak for what the two sides have been saying. In the defense sector, clearly, if you take a look on one count, if there is the joint production of GE jet engines and HAL, which will ultimately use them for its latest version of the LCA, light combat aircraft, then that will be a very important move ahead in favor of India, considering that India has been seeking technology transfer because it wants to be self-dependent, self-reliant, and not continue to be one of the largest importers of defense equipment, considering that for the longest ever time, India has been hugely dependent on Russia for its defense equipment imports. Even though now India has increased its basket, getting more from France, Israel, as well as America. However, the stress is on Atmanirbharta, and therefore it is important that then technology transfer is also made available to India. However, that is an aspect where America hasn't really been forthcoming. So if there is a decision on that, Priyanshi, that is going to be one of the biggest takeaways from this entire visit.
Absolutely, Maha. We'll of course wait and watch what happens in that crucial visit. Thanks very much for joining us. And before going to Washington, the Prime Minister led the International Yoga Day celebrations at the UN headquarters in New York. And it was a special celebration as the yoga program at the United Nations created the Guinness World Record for people from the most number of nationalities performing yoga together. People from 135 nationalities participated at this yoga event, breaking the earlier record of 114 nationalities. Listen in to what the Prime Minister said at this event.
Yoga is free from copyright, free from patents, and free from royalty payments. Yoga is adaptable to your age, gender, and fitness level. Yoga is unifying. It is for everyone, for all ethnicities, for all faiths, and for all cultures. Yoga is a way of life, a holistic approach to health and well-being, a way to mindfulness in thoughts and action.
Now, who was the yoga instructor who led this record-breaking event? It was famous ballerina turned yoga professional Annalise Richmond who led the celebrations alongside Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the UN lawns. She teaches yoga at 100 universities and she led the yoga session with a group of 6 American children. Take a look.
Very warm welcome to our Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji.
Famous ballerina turned yoga professional Annalise Richmond leading the Yoga Day celebrations at the UN lawns alongside PM Modi. She leads the yoga session with a group of 6 American children between the ages of 8 and 12 years. Richmond was contacted by the Indian representatives at the UN through her local teacher in NYC to participate in the yoga event with Prime Minister Modi. Richmond's first exposure to yoga was when she was 18. But she believed that it was only about stretching. 5 years later, when she met a Bengaluru-based art of living teacher in New York, she began to believe in the practice. This greatly helped her heal from the injuries she sustained in her profession. She says that certain breathwork and meditation practices eased her anxiety while navigating a high-pressure career. She learned yoga at the Art of Living campus in Bengaluru that she visited in 2006.
You know, India holds a really dear place in my heart because I did all of my yoga, pranayama, and meditation training in India through India with Gurudev, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, and the Art of Living. I did it 23 years ago.
Richmond now teaches yoga in over 100 universities across the US, including Harvard and Columbia.
A great honor for me to be leading yoga, pranayama, meditation for PM Modi, who has helped spread this knowledge around the world.
Bureau Report, NDTV.
An unfortunate news now coming in from Manipur. A blast has injured 3 people in the northeastern state that has been witnessing ethnic violence for close to 2 months now. Police sources say that a bomb that was planted in an SUV in the Bishnupur district blasted and injured 3 people. They add that currently it's suspected to be an IED or an improvised explosive device. And as the situation is not getting normal despite the Home Minister's visit to the state 3 weeks ago, the Union Home Minister Amit Shah has called for an all-party meeting on the 24th of June in New Delhi to discuss the situation in Manipur. My colleague Ratnadeep Chaudhary is joining us for more details on this. And Ratnadeep, tell us about this blast that has injured at least 3 people and also this all-party meeting that was a demand of the opposition.
That's right. In fact, this blast took place this evening at Kwakta, which is on the border of the Bishnupur and the Churachandpur district. Remember, the Bishnupur is a district in the hill, in the valley area of the state, and Churachandpur is in the hill. And this area, Kwakta and Kangwai, have been witnessing, violence flare-ups ever since the violence started. In fact, last week also they were firing in this area, and now what we're picking up from police sources is that an SUV vehicle, a Mahindra Scorpio vehicle, which was parked near a culvert there, it suddenly blew off. Now, police suspect it to be a powerful IED blast, and 3 bystanders have received serious injuries. They've been shifted to Imphal, in fact, and therefore, now massive security cover has been put in the area. The police is trying to investigate what really happened. But this is definitely something which will be a reason of concern for the state government and center. And now Union Home Minister has called for that key meeting on June 24, where he's meeting all the parties. Remember, the opposition parties had been calling for an all-party meeting on the Manipur issue. And this comes at a time when, at least in the last 2 days, the number of incidents had come down. However, there were incidents of firing which was reported from these border areas between the valley and the hill region. And in fact, the internet ban in Manipur has been extended also to June 25. In fact, today the schools were supposed to be reopened. That has also been deferred to July 1st. So therefore, now this incident is definitely a reason of concern for center and state.
Right, Ratnadeep, thanks very much for joining us with those details. Let's now focus on the onion crisis for the farmers in Maharashtra. After investing thousands in their crop, the farmers are receiving only 2.5 rupees per kilo in the markets for their onions. Despite assurances from the government, they say that nothing has changed on the ground. What's the reason for this? Traders say that farmers in several states are growing onions and not just in Maharashtra. So the demand for onion grown in Maharashtra is falling. Here's our ground report.
Sahib Pawar from Ahmednagar district of Maharashtra grew onions on his 3-acre land at the cost of 40,000 rupees per acre. But with the market price now at 2.5 rupees a kilo, he will barely make 15,000 rupees for an acre of crop. Naturally, he's upset.
प्याज करने में ये शासन ने जो अनुदान भी नहीं दिया और ये 3 एकड़ में 75,000 इसका तोटा हो गया.
Onion farmers are bearing the brunt of a bumper crop leading to a glut. Traders say not just Maharashtra, farmers of other states are also growing onions, due to which demand from Maharashtra and other states has come down.
5 महिने झालं आमचा कांदा अक्षरशः काडी मोलितो शासन आमच्याकडे लक्ष देत नाही.
महाराष्ट्र में जितना उत्पन्न इसके पहले होता था उसके ज़्यादा भी उत्पन्न अभी कर्नाटक, तमिलनाडु, केरल उधर स्थानिक हो रहा है. इसके लिए उधर जो इधर से कांदा खरीद करके खरीदार जो बेचते थे वो कम हो गया. बोले इसकी वजह से उसके जो रेट जो कम आ रहे प्याज के.
In March this year, farmers marched 110 kilometers from Nashik to Mumbai, demanding the right price for their produce as well as help to tackle the impact of low price of onions. The government assured farmers that they will be helped in an attempt to convince them to end their protest.
सरकार इंटरवेन करेंगी और किसानों को राहत देगी, इस प्रकार का लिखित स्वरूप में आश्वासन दिया था. लेकिन आज जब किसान बहुत संकट में है, 2 रुपए प्रति किलो की दर से अपनी प्याज बेचने के लिए मजबूर है, सरकार कुछ नहीं कर रही.
Farmers' leaders are upset with the government as there has been no change in the condition of the farmers, despite promises. While the government promises relief to the farmers, the question is, when will the promise of financial assistance from the government come through? With Sagar Dusal in Ahmednagar and Sohit Mishra in Mumbai, Sneha Koshi for NDTV.
Time for a short break now. More news continues on the other side. Stay tuned.
The NDTV News Network
that informs,
inspires
and illuminates. Watch every side of the story here on NDTV,
because the only side we're on is yours.
in a world filled with noise, we bring you news that you can rely on with accuracy and integrity, because at NDTV, trust is everything.
"23 years of the big fight." This show is not just an ordinary debate show, but it is a responsibility in service of our viewers.
Facts are the foundation of a news story, but it's the views that shape these stories. Because when you hear views from all sides, you get the complete picture.
A debate has many facets. Perhaps no one right answer. Left, right, and center. Conversations that get to the core of the debate.
NDTV for news you can trust. No sensationalism, no ugly debates, no agenda. We strive to be transparent and unbiased in our reporting so you can get news that you can rely on.
It's undeniable. We're facing the crisis of the generation, climate change. And it's happening. Not in some far-off distant land or some millions of years away. It's happening now. And it affects everything we know and love. Information around climate change can often feel too distant, too jargony, too scary, too anxiety-filled, too technical, or too political. I'm here to change that. The Climate Explainers, part of NDTV's 6-month-long campaign, building a blueprint for climate action. The climate clock is ticking, but we're just in time. The NDTV News Network
that informs,
inspires,
and illuminates. Watch every side of the story here on NDTV.
because the only side we're on is yours.
In a world filled with noise, we bring you news that you can rely on with accuracy and integrity. Because at NDTV, trust is everything.
"23 years of the big fight." This show is not just an ordinary debate show, but it is a responsibility in service of our viewers.
Facts are the foundation of a news story, but it's the views that shape these stories. Because when you hear views from all sides, you get the complete picture.
A debate has many facets, perhaps no one.
Welcome back. We're tracking the Prime Minister's visit to the United States, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi has now reached the hotel that he's going to stay in over the next couple of days in Washington, D.C. in the United States. He is in Washington, D.C. as a part of his 4-day state visit to the United States. And over the next couple of days, he has important events lined up, including a state dinner that will be hosted by the U.S. President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden. That will be followed by a bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the US President Joe Biden that could involve strategic discussions that concern both India and the United States on defense technology and on semiconductors as well. Along with that, the Prime Minister will also address the US Congress. It will be a joint sitting of the US Congress that the Prime Minister will address, and this will be his second address to the US Congress. Those important events lined up ahead for the Prime Minister in Washington, and there you can see visuals of him reaching his hotel where he is going to be spending the next 2 days. Switching tracks now, the impact of climate change is real and in fact lethal. Heat-linked deaths have been reported in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. In fact, in Uttar Pradesh's Balia, over 50 deaths have been linked to heat waves by doctors. Though on the other side, the local administration says that heat is not established as the reason for these deaths just yet, and the causes of these deaths are still being investigated. Take a look at our report.
Multiple suspected deaths from a crushing heat wave in two of India's most populous states, Uttar Pradesh and neighbouring Bihar. But are the Nitish Kumar and Yogi Adityanath governments prepared to acknowledge them? In Balia, an impoverished eastern Uttar Pradesh district right on the border with Bihar, where over 50 suspected heat wave deaths took place in just 72 hours between June 16th to 18th. 32-year-old Sangeeta Devi says she could not save her 65-year-old mother, Lalmani Devi, despite living barely 8 kilometers away from the district hospital. Sangeeta claims her mother died on June 18 due to heat stroke, an hour after she was brought to the hospital. But an initial slip issued by the hospital on a plain piece of paper does not mention any cause of death.
उनको थोड़ा सा हल्का बुखार आया और कुछ देरी के बाद उनको तेज बुखार होने लगा। तेज बुखार होने के कारण हमने कहा अपने बच्चों से कि चलो नानी जी को दिखा दिया जाए बलिया जिला अस्पताल में। यहाँ कोई हमने इलाज नहीं कराया, ले जाकर हमने उनको जिला अस्पताल में एडमिट किया। कुछ देरी के बाद डॉक्टर ने उनको देखा, सुई लगाया, दवा सुई होने के 1 घंटे बाद उनका डेथ हो गया।
At the Balia District Hospital on Wednesday, 60-year-old Mohammad Munna says his wife, Rizwana Khatun, died at the district hospital on June 17th, exhibiting symptoms of a heat stroke. But he has been running from pillar to post for his wife's death certificates. All he has so far is a white slip, which does not mention the cause of death.
हमारी वाइफ को 16 तारीख को एडमिट किए और 17 तारीख को सुबह में 7 बजे डेट कर गए। तो एक कागज हॉस्पिटल से हमको मिला था कि आप 5वें दिन आइएगा और अपना मृत्यु प्रमाण पत्र ले जाइएगा। हॉस्पिटल आए तो उसी कागज पर लिख के दिए कि कचहरी से जाइए लिखवा के एफिडी बनवा के लाइए। एफिडी बनवा के ला करके दिए हैं तो उन्होंने कहा कि आप जो है शनिचर के दिन आइए।
Meanwhile, the death toll in Balia continues to rise. It stands at 74 right now. A government doctor who initially attributed the deaths to a heat stroke was removed by the government.
Cause of death जो है under investigations है। जब इन्वेस्टिगेशंस की रिपोर्ट आएंगे तभी आप कॉज बता पाएंगे कि क्या एक्चुअल कॉज हुआ था उसके।
अच्छा, डेथ सर्टिफिकेट
जब जरूरत पड़ेगा कॉज आ जाएगा, सर्टेन हो जाएगा कोई कॉज, तभी उस डेथ सर्टिफिकेट में भी हम कॉज ऑफ डेथ मेंशन कर पाएंगे।
Denial in the nearby Deorio district too, where local papers have reported more than 50 suspected heatwave deaths in 24 hours. But this has been denied by the local administration.
अभी तक हम लोग के संज्ञान में कोई भी कंफर्मेटरी हीट स्ट्रोक से डेथ नहीं हुआ है। अभी तक 1 तारीख से अब तक 4 मरीज जो संदेहास्पद थे उन्हें हीट स्ट्रोक मानकर भर्ती किया गया, बेहतर उपचार दिया गया, लेकिन उसको बचाने में हम लोग सफल नहीं हो पाए। ब्रॉड डेड मरीजों के बारे में क्या उनको घर पे था इस बारे में हम लोग नहीं बता सकते हैं, लेकिन वो मरीज मृत्यावस्था में हमारे इमरजेंसी में लाए गए थे।
However, in Bihar, where 40 have died so far due to heat stroke, the approach is a bit different. The authorities are accepting the cause of death to be heat stroke.
कम से कम 20 से 22 पेशेंट 25 पेशेंट आए होंगे जो हीट स्ट्रोक से उनको हीट स्ट्रोक हुआ था और उसमें से काफ़ी लोगों की डेथ हो गई है। कितने लोगों की लगभग 25 पेशेंट्स की डेथ हुई है।
The Union Health Minister has held 2 meetings so far with states seeing heat waves. But on the ground, the situation appears to be worrying. With Himanshu Sharma and Karuna Sindhu, Bureau Report for NDTV.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi is being welcomed by the Indian diaspora in Washington in the United States as he's on his 4-day visit to the United States. There you can see the Prime Minister meeting the kids, the members of the Indian diaspora that are there in Washington to receive him, to welcome him. The Prime Minister is on a 4-day visit to the United States. It's his first state visit to the country, and as you can see, the Indian diaspora received the Prime Minister in Washington. Before this, he was in New York, and over the next 2 days, the Prime Minister is going to be in Washington, where he has important meetings lined up with the US President Joe Biden. There you can see the Indian diaspora and Prime Minister Narendra Modi's supporters there in Washington, welcoming him with posters and greeting the Prime Minister as he has reached Washington, D.C. Over the next couple of days, the Prime Minister, as we've reported, will be attending a state dinner that will be hosted by the US President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden as well. Before that, he will be meeting several CEOs, some leading CEOs that the Prime Minister will be meeting, including Micron CEO Sanjay Mehrotra, CEO of GH Lawrence Scott Jr. and CEO of Applied Materials Gary Dickerson. These are the CEOs that the Prime Minister will be meeting over the next few hours. Time for a short break now. News continues on the other side. Stay tuned.
A debate. NDTV for news you can trust. No sensationalism, no ugly debates, no agenda. We strive to be transparent and unbiased in our reporting so you can get news that you can rely on.
It's undeniable. We're facing the crisis of the generation, climate change, and it's happening. Not in some far-off distant land or some millions of years away. It's happening now. And it affects everything we know and love. Information around climate change can often feel too distant, too jargony, too scary, too anxiety-filled, too technical, or too political. I'm here to change that. The Climate Explainers, part of NDTV's 6-month-long campaign, building a blueprint for climate action. The climate clock is ticking, but we're just in time.
The NDTV News Network
that informs,
inspires,
and illuminates. Watch every side of the story here on NDTV,
because the only side we're on is yours.
In a world filled with noise, we bring you news that you can rely on with accuracy and integrity, because at NDTV, trust is everything.
"23 years of the big fight." This show is not just an ordinary debate show, but it is a responsibility in service of our viewers.
Facts are the foundation of a news story, but it's the views that shape these stories. Because when you hear views from all sides, you get the complete picture.
A debate has many facets, perhaps no one right answer. Left, right, and center. Conversations that get to the core of the debate.
NDTV for news you can trust. No sensationalism, no ugly debate, no agenda. We strive to be transparent and unbiased in our reporting so you can get news that you can rely on.
It's undeniable. We're facing the crisis of the generation, climate change. And it's happening. Not in some far-off distant land or some millions of years away. It's happening now. And it affects everything we know and love. Information around climate change can often feel too distant, too jargony, too scary, too anxiety-filled, too technical, or too political. I'm here to change that. The Climate Explainers, part of NDTV's 6-month-long campaign, building a blueprint for climate action. The climate clock is ticking, but we're just in time.
The NDTV News Network
that informs,
inspires,
and illuminates. Watch every side of the story here on NDTV,
because the only side we're on is yours.
In a world filled with noise, we bring you news that you can rely on with accuracy and integrity, because at NDTV, trust is everything.
"23 years of the big fight." This show is not just an ordinary debate show, but it is a responsibility in service of our viewers.
Facts are the foundation of a news story, but it's the views that
After New York, Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Washington, D.C., ahead of his meeting with President Joe Biden and several business leaders. Euphoric Indian diaspora welcomes and cheers for Prime Minister Modi in Washington, a state dinner hosted by U.S. President Joe Biden, and an address to the U.S. Congress on the Prime Minister's agenda next. In New York, Prime Minister Narendra Modi led the Yoga Day event at the UN headquarters on the 9th International Yoga Day. The event creates a Guinness World Record for people of most number of nationalities performing yoga together. At the event, the Prime Minister says yoga is universal and free from copyright. 3 civilians injured in a blast in ethnic violence hit Manipur as a bomb planted in an SUV blasts in Manipur's Kwakta. Home Minister Amit Shah calls for an all-party meeting to discuss the Manipur situation on the 24th of June. Congress's Sonia Gandhi appeals for peace in Manipur as ethnic violence continues for close to 2 months now. She says unprecedented violence has left a deep wound in the conscience of the nation, adds that the violence has devastated lives and forced people to flee the only place they call home. Climate change kills. Heat-linked deaths reported from Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. In UP's Balia, 54 suspected heatwave deaths in just the last 3 days, though the administration there denies heat being the reason behind these deaths. And NDTV speaks to badminton champions Chirag Shetty and Satvik Ranik Reddy, who became the first Indian pair to win the Super 1000 title at the Indonesia Open and rose to world number 3. They now say their aim is to become world number 1.
Back a little bit, which they really.
Hello and welcome to NDTV 24/7. I'm Priyanshi Sharma and our focus remains the Prime Minister's visit to the United States. Well, Prime Minister Modi is in Washington, D.C. as a part of his 4-day U.S. state visit. He was received by the Indian diaspora there that welcomed him with cheers, dance and celebration. The Prime Minister has several important events lined up in Washington. On Thursday, he will attend a dinner hosted by US President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden at the White House, followed by a bilateral meeting. After that, he will address a joint sitting of the US Congress. My colleague Maha Siddiqui joining us for more on this from the United States. And Maha, tell us what are the important issues that could come up in those discussions with US President Joe Biden and how this visit is important for both India and the US?
Well, from the US side, they have said that the issue of Ukraine is going to come up, that there will be a discussion on it, considering the impact that the Ukraine war has had on fuel and food prices across the world. Much of it may be under control at the moment. However, the jerks that the global economy has seen because of the COVID-19 pandemic and subsequently because of the Ukraine war certainly is something that the US side would want to discuss. However, on part of the Indian side, and sources have pointed this out, that for the Indian side, if there is a discussion initiated by the US on Ukraine, then India will once again lay out what has been its stand, and that Prime Minister Modi has already taken up the matter with President Vladimir Putin himself in the FCO meeting in Samarkand, where he said that this is not the era of war. On the other side, the two sides are also looking at forging closer ties, keeping in mind the growing aggression of China in the Indo-Pacific and the common threat of China. And in that realm, we'll be able to see some more defense and tech collaboration. As far as defense is concerned, the GE, the joint production of GE jet engines with HAL is going to be one very important announcement. And let me quickly point out to you, Priyanshi, that the Prime Minister, after landing today in Washington, D.C., he is also expected to meet the CEO of GE, H. Lawrence Culp Jr., and also Micron CEO Sanjay Mehrotra. And that gives us a sense probably that these initiatives are likely to go ahead. As far as Micron is concerned, what we learn is that as far as the semiconductor cooperation is concerned between the two sides, there is likely to be some big announcement involving Micron. So this list of the Prime Minister's meetings with CEOs is giving us a sense that it is all likely to culminate with announcements on the 22nd.
Right, Maha, we'll wait for those announcements to be made. Thanks very much for joining us. And the Prime Minister there has met the Indian diaspora in Washington. And before going to Washington, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in fact, led the International Yoga Day celebrations at the UN headquarters in New York. And it was a special celebration as the yoga program at the UN created the Guinness World Record for people from the most number of nationalities performing yoga together. People from 135 nationalities participated in the yoga event at the UN headquarters, breaking the earlier record of 114 nationalities. Listen in to what the Prime Minister said at the event.
Yoga is free from copyright, free from patents, and free from royalty payments. Yoga is adaptable to your age, gender, and fitness level. Yoga unifying. It is for everyone, for all ethnicities, for all faiths, and for all cultures. Yoga is a way of life. a holistic approach to health and well-being, a way to mindfulness in thoughts and action.